when I'm walking down the street.
I do want to say to Donnie and many of you in this room that over a very long career in this city, all of you have helped me and my colleagues tell the truth and to try to tell.
I may not look like you and you me, but
my head up.
I'm from South Carolina, so I just...
gotta be you.
What does this event mean to you, Miss Peggy Mars?
Oh, my heart,
Happy 20th anniversary.
my heart is about loving up on my sisters. Do you know what it feels like to have your sisters in the room? Johnny.
Gotta be me and dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. I am beautiful, I am blessed, but not just what you see in the flesh. I'm free from people, free from myself. There's a
The doctor lived next door to the janitor to the reverend and the lawyer. We were together. Now we get so high and mighty that you create stress for your society because you don't like poor black folks either. That's a health problem. Get yourself together so I can stop being taking care of geriatric people and get back to pediatrics. I thank you, Donnie, for all you've done. Let's keep doing it all the more.
letting His glory shine through. Dare to be you, dare to be me, dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. And I dare you, I dare you, I dare you to be you.
First name's Donnie, last name's Glover. In it to win it for the long haul, baby. Listen, we have a very special interview today. I want you to go to afro.com. Afro.com. The Afro knows what it's like to endure challenging times. John H. Murphy Sr., former enslaved man, founded the Afro 130 years ago with $200 from his wife, Martha Howard Murphy. Together, they created a platform to offer images and stories of hope to advance their community. The Afro provides readers with good news about the Black community not otherwise found. To discuss this, we have with us none other than the publisher, Frances Toni Draper. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well. How are you? Good to see you.
I'm blessed by the best. No need to be stressed. Keep my head to the sky. No need to cry because ain't nobody going to listen. No way. So we have done this interview thing a time or two, and I was just thinking, how could we do something and talk about what we haven't talked about in the past? And you have any ideas? Okay, well, I have an idea.
There's a lot we can talk about every day.
What I wanted to do, just to start off differently, is now we know you're the publisher. We know that you're a pastor. We know that you're very community. We know that this is Black History Month, so we certainly have to share some of the history of your family. But what I wanted to start off differently with right now in this day and time is about parenting. I went to school with Kevin. I went to church with both Kevin and Andrea. But I remember in school, particularly at Morehouse, that Kevin is one of the kindest, your son is one of the kindest people I've ever met. Really, anywhere.
Yes.
How does that happen? We live in a day and time when our young Black men, I know it's tough for women, and there's, women have their challenges. Black women have their challenges. Black men have their challenges. But tell me about raising children in this city, tough city.
It is a tough city. Let me say, we were fortunate that my husband and I raised our 4 children. So we have three male children, 1 female child, and they're not children, they're all adults. And so Partnerships are important, and even if you don't have both parents in the home, it is important, I believe, especially for our boys, to have them be exposed to, mentored by, in relationship with adult males who will speak truth to their spirits, and also by example lead them in the right way. Now, I'm a product of a single mother household, and so I'm not saying, moms, that we can't raise our sons. We can, and we can raise our daughters, and we need other men in their lives to to really step up. And there are a lot of men doing that. There are a lot of men who have invested hours and hours and hours in other young men and young women. Young women need their dads too.
Oh, no question. Boy, talk to my daughter's mother. Woo! Don't forget my daughter.
That's right.
Because it may be easier for men to relate to a son. A daughter is a whole other ball of wax. A little boy, you can give him a toy and put him in a corner. He's good, as long as it's just a toy. Little girl, what does she want? Everything. 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 Time. More time.
That's how you spell love, right? Time.
Daughter. It's a different rapport.
Well, your eyes lit up talking about your daughter.
It touches your heart in a different way.
That's great.
Yeah, they grab everybody.
That's great.
So any encouragement to our mothers out there? I mean, you write the newspaper, you publish the paper, you see what's happening. It's mayhem. 23-year-old girl, 2 blocks from here, not far from where your building is, up the street from your new location. They just start pulling out guns and start shooting.
Yeah, it is. We're in a violent time. I wouldn't just say that Baltimore is violent. There's violence everywhere, as we saw in Michigan. I mean, 63 or 64 mass shootings in the United States, and we're not even through February yet, and that's just in this year. So it's an epidemic around violence, and it's an epidemic in the family. And I contend that in this city, we've got 2 things that we need to address as emergencies, because they are. The violence is an emergency. The abandoned properties, it's an emergency. And we got to act like it's an emergency. Children are walking past yellow tape trying to go to school. Children are terrified when they hear about all of these shootings that are happening across the country in schools. And so they don't have safe places to be. So parents have to parent, regardless of the age of the parent. You're old enough to have that. You may not have been biologically, you were old enough to have the child, then you'll be old enough to raise the child. And if you don't know how to raise a child, then let's reach out. Let's help. We are a village. We are a community. We've not all always had everything that we needed, but our neighborhoods were strong, our families were strong, our churches were strong, our communities were strong, and we didn't know we didn't have. We were strong within our own communities, and we took pride in our communities. So that's why I'm glad the Afro is bringing back Afro Clean Block. Now we're going to do it we have not abandoned it. We've been doing it, but we're going to be intentional about it in the Upton area, where we are redeveloping that mansion for our archives to make them more accessible to the public.
That's just around the corner from me. I could be in that building in like 2 minutes. I think we might talk about that.
We got space we're going to be leasing in that building.
It is a huge building. What was that building before? Was it an orphanage?
No, that building was, believe it or not, that building, when it was built in 1838, was a single family home that sat on 10 acres. It was a plantation in the middle of Baltimore City. And you know what? Sometimes we act like we're still on the plantation, but it was a plantation. It's now on 1 acre. It has been several things. So it was a private residence. It was the home of the first radio station in Baltimore, WCAO. It was a music school for African American artists and musicians who could, because the Peabody Institute would not admit blacks. So it was that. And it was a Baltimore City public school last before it was vacated in 2006. So it's been empty all of that time and vacant.
How did it come on your radar?
Well, it came on our radar through Dr. Dale Green, who is a professor of architecture at Morgan State University. And I'm gonna give a shout out to Dr. Green. There are only about 10, I understand, African-American architects in the country that specialize in the preservation of historical buildings. And so he put it on our radar to say, hey, there are 2 remaining Greek Revival mansions in Baltimore City. And the city is looking, to put out a proposal for bids to restore that. And we, Upton is we were birthed in Upton, birthed in West Baltimore. So when we heard about the opportunity,
I see, it's full circle.
It's full circle, and it's full circle. We're committed to Baltimore City, and committed to doing what we can do, doing our part in Baltimore City. And so we want to make this a hub that community can come to, especially young people, and be able to research our archives. We have 3 million photographs. And, I believe that when people see themselves in a positive light, it does something to strengthen who we are. But if all we see is negativity and violence, you would think that all of us are negative and violent because of the way we are portrayed in some of the media. Certainly not by you, Donnie Glover, not by us, but in a lot of places.
I was thinking about Utah and Druid Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if I ever went in that building, but I do remember going past it. I'm just telling you what I remember, but I remember where it was. Do you remember that building?
Of course, yes, I remember that building, 628 North Utah Street. I'll tell you a little bit of a story as I understand it about that building. So when my grandfather and his brothers purchased that location, it was one building on the corner of Utah and Druid Hill. But there were other row houses, adjacent to it. So when they expanded, they bought the next building, knocked out the wall, right? And that's how they did it. So when you went in that building, you went up steps and down steps, and because they were houses that were kind of cobbled together. And to get to the 3rd floor where my grandfather's office was, I forgot how many steps there were. It seems like 100, but probably 50 steps or something straight up to the editorial department. And then we had a press in the basement of the building. So we did our own printing, and at one time employed 200 people. Well, that was before digital age, right? Before the internet. We don't need 200 people today to do what we do. But it was a big deal. We employed a lot of people, and a lot of families were able to care for a lot of people were able to care for their families because they worked for the Afro, a lot of paper boys and paper girls and all of that.
I was a paper boy.
I was a paper girl.
I didn't know about paper girls until you had an event down at the Reginald Lewis Museum.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Eddie O?
Yeah, it's like Annie O Afro, but it sounds like Eddie O. Because as Congressman Nfume said the other day when we were at Upton, if you were an Afro news boy, news girl, you could ride the bus free. So if you had that Afro sack on your shoulder, you just got on the bus, right? And you could go from one stop to the next and not have to pay. Now you had to get off at the next stop. I remember getting on the bus, you had to get off at the next stop, but then you get back on the bus.
Penn North was my spot.
That was your spot?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, well, I had a route. My dad helped me to build what I think was the largest Afro route in West Baltimore. Went from Moreland and Baker to Sandtown and down to Edmondson and Warwick. But selling them Afros taught me so much. One, if you're consistent, you get Christmas presents. But also, it teaches you how to protect your bike.
That's for sure.
And thank God I never got in a fight, but I did get tried at Evanston and Warwick at Perkins Square Baptist Church. I was like, where the church people? That's my church. Where the church people at? Them cats on Evanston and Warwick were tough. And then Gilmore Holmes, one of them cats snatched my brand new bike. And one of my dad's friends took me back down there. I don't know how he knew where the bike was. He took me, of all of them apartments and projects, he took me straight to the house and said, get your bike. Yeah. People looked out for each other back then.
People looked out for each other. People were not afraid to get involved. People weren't afraid to stand up as well. So you did have that. That's what I meant by a sense of community. And you still have a sense of community in some places. Not enough, though. Not enough. And when you know, I don't want to stay in the past because we're in 2023. The Afro is much different than it was back then. Our communities are much different. But I do want to just recognize that we were close to 1 million people in population at one time, and now we're 500,000, 400,000, somewhere in that number. And so your tax base shrinks. We move out of community. The communities are then taken over by people that don't look like us, and we lose a lot of our history and our pride and even our well-being for our young people and for our communities.
So you have been a part of the national Black press movement. There yes. is an association, a National Newspaper Publishers Association. And correct. I believe there was a conference recently in Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
But I went to one out in Portland. And okay. the topic I was charged with speaking with was the digital, how to sell ads. How has business changed for you?
Oh, business has changed dramatically. Let me say a little bit about the transformation of the business model, because sometimes we talk about technology and social media and all of the digitization and the way that we're presenting news now. Those are just tools, and those tools are going to change. And so the challenge for anyone in any industry is to keep up with the changing tools. And so it's changed for digital, it's changed for technology. But if you hang your hat on 2023 technology, you're going to be out probably by the end of 2023. The mindset has to be that these are tools that we're going to use to do what we do better. But the work that needs to be done to gather the news, because Black media, most Black media, and I will never say all, we're trusted sources, right? And so we still have to do the work. How we deliver it is, yes, it's powered by technology. But if you put everything on tech and everything on digital and you don't do the work and the community doesn't trust you, I don't care how you put it out there, it's not going to be well received. So we have tools now that help to level the playing field, right? Level the playing field. So you don't have to have 1,000 people or 500 people, 200 people in your newsroom. You just have to do what you do, Donnie, what I believe the Afro does. You have to gain the trust of the community. You have to write about things that they are interested in. And then we deliver it through those other platforms that are constantly changing. And so at the Afro, our whole operation has been revolutionized by technology. And I'm sure yours has too.
Especially with the pandemic. I know you're streaming now.
Yeah, well, for us, we had already put all of our operations in the cloud right before the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, we were in like the first quarter of 2020, we left physical location literally on a dime. On a dime. We just said, okay, wait a minute, this is happening. We're closing down. Everybody's already on the cloud. We were already using different technology for our phone communications. Everybody had a laptop to take home with them. We were already wireless, if you will. We weren't dependent on, servers and all of that. And so just being in position to do that was a blessing.
You said we're not going to discuss the past, but how it had to be more than one person could fathom digitalizing your archives. Or while this is a digital world, we got our phones right at our beck and call. But I've been to the archives. The events lady.
Who, Diane?
Diane took me in there, and I could have stayed in there for a long time.
Yeah,
I could have stayed in there. I know we're talking about the feature, but I've seen the archives. I saw stories about people I'd never heard of, places I hadn't heard of, businesses. You could get lost in there for a long. I would be lost for a long time.
Correct. So the archives really, even though they chronicle things in the past, they really very much a part of the present. And so the digitization of them is a arduous, loving process. 3 million photographs and artifacts that people have not seen, including original letters between Booker T. Washington and my great-grandfather, John Murphy. Where Booker T. Washington wrote in 1909, he says, and I'm paraphrasing, "Dear Mr. Murphy," he says, "this is Negro History Week." And he said, "I wish you would write in your paper about the need to teach our own history in the public schools." He said, "We're the only race." Booker T. Washington wrote to my great-grandfather and said, "We're the only race on earth that does not tell our history. The Germans tell their history and as it relates to the Nazis," and he ran it down. He said, "But we're the only race. So would you write something so the Baltimore City schools would teach that?" That's relevant in 2023. Because if you don't see yourself in a positive light any place, if you don't know who you are, then you don't know what to do, right? So that the archives are important in that way, right? We have original recordings between my grandfather, Carl Murphy, and Thurgood Marshall. They're talking about the Brown versus Board of Education case because my grandfather recorded everything. So you got this conversation where Thurgood Marshall is saying, "Hey, Carl," and he's saying, "Hey, Thurgood," and Thurgood Marshall is saying to him, "What did you think about my brief?" And they're just talking about the NAACP. We just found that. So those are the kinds of things that are in the archives that we want to make accessible. It is tedious work because you have reporters' notebooks, you have programs from different events. You have, as you said, stories about people that we would not know about if it wasn't for the Black press. We sent war correspondents to World War II. We had the largest contingency of Black journalists in Europe in World War II and wrote a book called "This Is Our War." So I think I'm going to reprint that because it really, the soldiers from America, Black soldiers and our war correspondents are saying, when we went to Europe, we weren't treated the same way that we were in the United States. We were accepted in Europe.
But other countries like France loved us.
Yeah, that's what they said. So we could walk down the street. We could go into where we wanted to eat. We could do pretty much what we wanted to do, right? And we could do that in Europe and then come back home and be treated like property. So the Afro chronicles that. And then
the war correspondents.
War correspondents, right? They're war correspondents, and they wrote stories back about what was happening with the Black soldiers, and we printed them. Or take the 6888. You're familiar with the 6888, the all-female postal battalion. Well, one of Carl Murphy's, my aunt was one of the members there. We didn't even know it till the gold medal thing started happening, right? But the Afro ran every single name of the women who were part of that battalion. So when Colonel Edna Cummings started on her quest to get a Congressional Gold Medal for that group, she went to the Afro and she saw that these people were from Ohio and these people were from Pennsylvania, and went to those federal legislators and said, "Hey, did you know some of your former constituents were a part of this 6888?" And sign on to the. And so we're working now to get a designation here in Maryland. So those hearings are coming up next month.
How do we teach history to our people today? Is that still an innate role of the Black press?
Absolutely, because the Black press is the only medium that has the accurate, thorough history. I'll give you an example. I was on a panel with a journalist from The Sun, and it was a panel about lynchings. And so The Sun wrote about lynchings from the perspective of the person who was being lynched was a criminal. So they just, it was just that's cold and calculating in most cases. The Afro wrote the story from the kitchen table of the mother who had just lost her son. And so opening up that door so we could go in as reporters. And when I was reporter, early in my journalism career, when we covered tragedies in Baltimore, it was going into the person's house and talking to them about what happened and getting a sense of who they were. They're not just another statistic. And even with all the violence we had in the city last night, for example, these are still families, they're people. There's more than just another notch that says now we have X number of people who are, and then just move on.
Do you ever challenge yourself to figure out how we can do more, even today?
Always. And I think that the key to doing more, Donnie Glover, is what we're doing today and what a group of 10 publishers is doing around the country, and it's called collaboration. We have to collaborate, not compete, collaborate with one another for, yes, a larger slice of the advertising and sponsorship pie. That's one part. But how powerful would it be if NMPA, as you mentioned earlier, if all of us ran like the same headline, regardless of how we get it out, whether it's print, whether it's electronic or whatever, for an issue. For example, if all of us took the same stand on what's happening in Florida, right? Call out that governor, talk about what it really means to keep our books and our curricula in the schools across the country. There's some things we'll be able to agree on. We'll not be arguing about critical race theory. We need to teach our history, and we need to take a stand together. And I think it's around collaboration. So I'm always one that's looking for opportunities to collaborate. And I think that the trick of the enemy is to keep us divided and make it a competition. We can collaborate on a lot of things.
So my daddy was a funeral director. And I learned early on I did not want to be a funeral director. Did everybody in your family want to go into the Afro business?
Absolutely not. No one, hardly, in our generation. So I'm fourth generation. And let me paint this picture for you of every day, not some days. Because and so in my branch of the family, so the founder had 10 children, right? So you have 10 different branches of the children of the family. I just happened to be in the Carl Murphy branch. Billy Murphy was in the George Murphy, branch. Jake Oliver was in the Rose Murphy Oliver branch. So we're in different branches of these 10, children of the founder, right? So that's the founding family. Then you had the second generation, which was my grandfather's generation, right? Then my mother's generation came along, and every single one of them was in the paper almost. Maybe not everybody, but the George B. Murphy family, they did law and education, but everybody else was there in the family. So as children, that's all we heard. I don't mean some days. I mean every day, single day. And our parents worked for the company, and so it was like an unwritten pact. When I grow up, I'm not doing that. We didn't say it out loud, but it was like, can we just find something else to do? This has been consuming. So to answer your question, none of us wanted to declare that that's what we wanted to do. I think Jake was the first one to come back to the paper because he had a law his career was in law, and somehow he hooked me into coming back. And so a couple others of us came back, but not like our parents' generation.
I disagree, because it's even harder. Yours is even more important because it is harder.
What you disagreeing with?
It's harder to. It's as hard today. I don't know that
It's hard. Yeah, I didn't say it was easy. It's hard. You asked me, did we want to come back? The answer is
Well, you didn't want to come back initially.
no. We
but
didn't
now-
want to come back initially. Really, we didn't want to come back initially. But once some of us came back, certainly we're invested in that. But I mean, as children, as teenagers, we didn't.
Yeah.
When we went to college, just like with your family's business, you didn't want to be,
But I had to help though. You're not gonna stay in that house and not help. I had to help all the way.
You got to help. Now, look, we may not have chosen journalism as a career, even though some of us did. My sister, for example, went to the same school my mother went to, which was the University of Wisconsin, for journalism. But then she got married, had 5 children, and did something else. But you do know the state of Maryland paid for Black people to go to college because the University of Maryland would not admit them. So my mother and her sisters went to Big Ten colleges on the state style.
Do we embrace education today the same way? I know that's a loaded question, but
That's a really loaded question. So when we say we, that's such a broad category. I think most people, let me say it another way. I think most people who have children want the best for their children. I just think inherently they want the best, whether or not they can navigate what needs to be done to deliver the best. They want the best for their children. And so education, I believe, is still important for our community. The home, you start talking about parenting, that's where education starts. It doesn't start when they get to pre-K or kindergarten. It starts at home. You got to teach certain things at home. And we expect the schools sometimes to do what is not happening at home. So I think you were right on it when you started talking about parenting at the outset of our conversation.
because your children are pretty accomplished. And before meeting Kevin in college,
Some of them, I have 4. So some of them are still working to reach their potential.
Kevin was at Poly. He went from Poly to Morehouse. I went from Poly to Dunbar to Morehouse. But again, he's one of the kindest people, one of the most accomplished Baltimoreans, and still kind. I mean, we've
Very
met
kind.
people with a smidgen of celebrity that he has. I've seen him. He's just
very kind. He
send out Bible verses. I don't know if others know that about him, but and he's about helping people.
Yep.
I mean, Kevin will actually pray for you.
He will. He does.
And that's just rare in this day and time. People pulling out guns, and these young boys. I'm not saying Kevin Jesus. I ain't saying that. I'm just saying.
Well, good. That's a good thing. Don't say that.
I'm just saying he's a kind person and very accomplished. Look how many of us, we get a little smidgen of celebrity and then our heads are all up in the air. He still helps with the family business.
He still helps with the family business. He has a position in the family business. He believes in the scripture that says, honor your father and mother, that your days might be long.
Upon the land which is Lord thy God
Right.
giveth thee.
Go ahead now. So he honors his parents. He honors, and even when he got married, he had Andre, my husband, who raised him since he was 7, and his biological father were both his best men. So he honors his parents, and he is.
That started with you. See, you could have been a different kind of person, but you weren't. I've never known you to be that way. But we all don't get it because now I'm gonna get you child support, visitation, all of this, and it only hurts the babies.
Well, it hurts. So I made up my mind a long time ago that the well-being, the mental, physical, social health of our children was more important than my agenda, because they had nothing to do with selecting who their parents are. regardless of the circumstances of their birth. They had nothing to do with that. Right? And so I am reaping the benefit of the time invested in children, in my children and other people's children. And I would say to any parent who's watching, advocate for your child. Remember that they are children. They have developmental stages. They're not adults in little bodies. They are children. And a lot of our children in 2023 are traumatized children. Between the pandemic and the violence, they're just traumatized.
Is the trauma any different today than 40 years ago, 80 years ago?
I think it is. No, I can't speak to 80 years ago, but I think the trauma is.
Yeah. No.
I think the trauma is a little bit.
Stop that.
I think the trauma is a little bit different than it was because the response is different. You know, and I know that if you got in trouble in school in this city,
you got a problem.
You had a problem. The neighbor on the block corrected you before your parents even got to you. If you were disrespectful to a teacher,
you get whacked in the class. It never happened to me because I wasn't going there.
Right. And so, your parents said to you,
don't embarrass this family.
Right. You're going to school. It's not a question about whether you're going to do your work. You're going to do your work. You're going to do your homework. You're going to change out of them school shoes and clothes when you get home because you're going to have to wear them tomorrow. Right. So, and parents, we haven't talked about this a lot. I think the other thing that's really changed, whether you liked it or not, you went to church. Whether you wanted to or not, you went to church. Anybody notice that Baltimore City has a church on every corner, 2 or 3 in the middle of almost every block in this city? Because the church, the faith community, was a place of refuge and a place of teaching. And, you didn't skip out. You might have, you might have done all kinds of things during the week, but you found yourself in somebody's church. And I read a statistic this week that Gen Zers are returning to church.
But had they ever been before?
Some of them had, but some of them haven't. And I don't want to knock millennials. I love millennials. I like young people, period. But, people got away from going. Well, we could have a whole lot of reasons. People say, well, I had church hurt. I just retired as a pastor in December. So, I heard a lot of things. I had church hurt. Church hurt. Somebody said something. Somebody did something.
Church people can't be a trip pastor.
What'd you say? They can be. That's why the church is for the sick, Glover. It's not for the well. So there's a whole bunch of a whole lot of us who are sick that are in the church looking for healing. So if we recognize that the person next to us also has issues and hurts, and they bring their full selves to the place, it's going to be some hurt. And hurt people hurt people.
Where you been at, Glover? Where you been at? I've been in my shoes.
Okay, we don't have to answer everything either. It's a personal relationship, but we need the fellowship. That's where, when I grew up in church, I made friends in church, but I learned some things too.
How do we get the church? Media and the church. I see PM Smith on Fox 45, media and the church. How do we snatch PM or the others and make them a part of this new era of media? Because church has changed too.
Oh, church has changed. The only thing that's the same is Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. Church is always evolving. And see, it's about a relationship. If you have a relationship with God first, then you will seek fellowship. And church doesn't have to be a particular church, but I say to people, find some place where you can be spiritually fed, regardless of what your faith is.
I went to a Presbyterian church, and it was a short service. It was about 25 minutes. Only thing they do calisthenics. You stand up, sit down. Oh, you stand up, sit down, do a couple jumping jacks. Oh, no, I'm just pulling you back. It was just different and it was short. I appreciate the brevity, but if you go like,
yeah, go ahead. Now I was going to say the Sunday service is just part. Should be. That's just part of it. That's not all of it, right? We go to church to be encouraged and to learn so that we can apply it someplace. And that's the other thing. We make church all about us. What we do.
You had to stay in church all day?
No, I grew up in the church and you stand up and sit down and then get out. But there were a lot of things other than, I grew up Episcopalian, so a lot of things other than the mass on Sunday that we, because it was about also serving the community.
Tell me about resurrecting, breathing life back into Afro Clean Block.
Well, Afro Charities, our 501c3 is really handling that. We've been doing Clean Block, will be 60 years old in November. And so Clean Block is the oldest environmental program in the country.
They took tires. People, I
That's
grew up
right,
on
tires, that's right.
tires would be everywhere, and people would paint them.
Yep, plant flowers in them.
Yes. Some were ugly. Some of them was like, those colors don't match. But considering what they could have been, it was recycling.
It was pride in your neighborhood, regardless of the color. Everybody had the same yellow, or everybody had the same stripes, or whatever it was. So flowers were planted inside of the tires, right?
1600 block of Gilmore, no, 1500 block. That whole block was lit. People took pride. I was coming through Eastern Avenue last weekend, and they have all of these lights. I don't know if you've seen it. They got just blocks and blocks, and where people got lights, look like Morocco or something, lights everywhere. And then we get over here, or I got to the black community, and I didn't see those lights. And I just wonder, we work hard to get a black mayor. Can a black mayor alone do it? I mean, where are we?
Nobody alone can do it. Black, white, and different. No one person can do it. Okay. You do need leadership. But it's to me, those of us who live in the Baltimore region, because we're in a region. I live in Baltimore City, you live in Baltimore City, but we're a region, right? So those of us who live here have to take responsibility. Government's not going to do it, and plus government's going to change every 4 to 8 years. So we have to be the ones demanding a change. We have to be, we have to be the ones saying enough is enough. We have to be the ones who will organize in our blocks. Now, unfortunately, too many of our blocks have one house here, one house there. But there are some strong neighborhood associations still around in Baltimore.
Upton, where you moving?
Upton's strong. They're strong.
Druid Heights.
Druid Heights is strong. Cherry Hill is strong. Lakeland is strong. There's strong community associations that are out there. So we just need to work together to do that. And I don't want to just simplify it. It has to be, I think, an awareness and a mindset that says, you know what, I got to live here. I mean, I have an abandoned house in the back of my house, and I worry them. I mean, until they fix it, they're going to hear my mouth about it. Y'all got to do something.
I've had to secure. That's what we've had to do. You have to secure it yourself. Some people will tell you can't do it. It's better to ask for forgiveness than permission if it's because a vacant next door, once that fire hits the roof, you're vulnerable.
Correct. And just to be, so we could ask, so where's the outrage? Not the outrage about what's being reported, but where's the outrage and where's the community engagement? So, I mean, push myself to make sure that I'm on the city council meetings. We got to push ourselves to testify. We have to do what we need to do and not just rely. We can criticize the mayor. The mayor is one person.
How do we get Black people to support Black media?
How do we get Black people to support? That's a great Great question. I think one thing that we're trying to do now, and we've just done it recently last week, is ask people what they want for what kind of news they think they want anyway. So to ask them for that, to be visible in the community, and to continue to talk about the value of the Black press, and stop buying into the hype that we don't need the Black press. We absolutely do need the Black press.
Why do we need the Black press?
We need the Black press because the Black press is going to tell the whole story, not just what's bad about our community, because every community has a challenge. But the Black press is going to talk about what's good about our community. So if you go to afro.com, if you go to your website, if you go to the Baltimore Times, you're going to see stories about people in our community that you can't find other places. Okay, so we have to continue to sing the song, because if we buy into the myth that the Black press is not needed, that's nothing but a trick. That's like saying, we're not important.
Big sis, every day I see Fox TV,
oh my God,
if I was weary or tired, all I got to do is watch them for 30 seconds, and I'm going right back to work. I'm going right back to work.
Right.
I'm going right back to work, because I tried, what's his name? Ron Nichols, Professor Nichols taught us from day one that our job was to counter. He didn't say this, but I now get it. He had us watch The Birth of a Nation, and our job is to counter the mainstream rhetoric. And it's like every day we're faced with countering the mainstream rhetoric every day.
But I think that our job is even expanded. And I hear what you're saying. We can counter them in a lot of ways, right? But one way that we counter them is to put our own news out there ourselves, and say as often as we can, support. People say, oh yeah, we love what the Afro is doing. Okay, but do you have a subscription? Right? It costs, for this Black History Month, it costs $30, not a day, not a week, not a month, $30 a year to get a digital subscription to the Afro. During this month, it's usually $40 for digital, or it's $80 if you want the print and digital, and you can give one of those away. That's like a 2-for-1. So it's $80 for both, and we mail it to your house, right? We can be intentional about tuning into what you're doing and putting it out there as a premier source of our news and information, right? So we've got to be our own best advocates, yes, but we also, and we need community who appreciates what we're doing, and even if they don't appreciate, tell us what we're not doing, what you'd like to see, to be advocates for us. And stop quoting Fox News.
They're the devil. I wonder how Black people can work there. They do the runaway slave report. They bring the Black man on there, and it's all Black people. Every crime ever committed in the history of mankind is Black people.
Correct.
I could not have that job. I thank God for the Black press. I thank God for the Afro. I got my first citywide gig there at the Afro. Wiley Hall was the editor. Wiley Hall.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a tough cookie. A lot of people have come through there. Tell me about these new superstars you have on the team. I saw one lady interviewing Wes Moore.
Alexis Taylor.
Alexis Taylor. Who is this young dynamo?
Well, we have a whole cadre of young folk, right? So we've got a lot of young Gen Zers and millennials who are trained, right? Journalists.
Oh, she was popping. She was pop.
Yeah, that's Alexis, and she's now our managing editor as well. And so the Reverend Dr. Dorothy Bulwer is still with us in a different role. But we have Alexis. We have 2 Report for America journalists, Megan Sales and Tashi McQueen. And what that means is that they were young people who, out of college, they were journalism majors, and they agreed to go to community newspapers, and Report for America pays half their salary. We pay half their salary. So we have 2 core members from Report for America. One covers politics, one covers business, right? We have a young woman out of Jackson State, Aria Brent. She's our culinary editor. She does live cooking shows on Facebook on Thursday evenings. And so young people in this Gen Z generation recognize, a lot of them recognize the disconnect, Donnie, between their education and what's really happening in the Black community. And so they are also passionate about, I'm finding they're passionate about history as a group. They want to know that the African-American history, because they didn't get it in school and they didn't get it at home, but they know that they are standing on the shoulders of kings and queens, and they want to know about that. They are fascinated with that. I was a little surprised at first around their passion around this, but they really are passionate. So the building we're in right now, for example, on Redwood Street, is an really old, historic, kind of beautifully restored building. That's where we are until Upton's finished. They come there and work. They love being in that building. So yeah.
You're on Redwood Street?
We're on Redwood Street, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're on Redwood Street until we move to Upton.
So what does a Dorothy Boulware work on?
So Dorothy Boulware does special projects for us. So for example, we're doing a series on the thing. We have a book that we wrote. People may not know about. It's called.
I saw somebody plug it here.
Yeah, it's called The Thing I Love About Baltimore. And so we wrote that book.
The Thing I Love About Baltimore.
Yeah, The Thing I Love About Baltimore. The foreword is done by the late Congressman Elijah Cummings. It's the last thing he wrote before he died. And that was in September of 2019. And so now we're interviewing people to tell us, what's the thing you love about Baltimore? So I think there's features on Paul Taylor this week. The thing I love about, we really are Baltimore advocates. We have a office in DC as well.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so we have a DC office, and we have a DC, we have DC readers. So we also are in DC.
Do the young people know that the Afro, and then don't smack me, but you were in 5 cities? No,
13. We had 13 editions at one time. So at one time we had physical brick and mortar offices in Baltimore, Washington, Richmond, Newark, Philadelphia. But we had we published editions up and down the East Coast.
So these young people like Alexa, I learned, don't laugh at me.
I wouldn't laugh at you.
It's funny though. I'm 57 and I swore without looking at the numbers that my demographic, silly me, was my age. And I looked at the numbers and the demographic, and I thought they were women, but it was young men 24 to 35.
I'm not surprised.
Blew me away. And I was like, because a younger person had told me, I don't even know where they were from, that you're looking over there and you should be looking right there. I didn't know that the biggest chunk was 24 to 35. And then it's like, wow, what content? And it just makes you rethink like, man, and I don't think we've necessarily been shooting over their heads, but now that I know that's where our greatest group is, I have to be more intentional in reaching them. And I'm wondering, so it means bringing in more people like Alexa.
Yeah, and we have a whole crew of young people. We have a multi-generational team. One thing that we're finding, and you're finding this too, I'm sure, and so are your listeners and viewers finding this, is that we arbitrarily divide people into groups, right? And we arbitrarily create friction between generations. The younger generations need the wisdom of a Donnie Glover and a Toni Draper, and Toni Draper and Donnie Glover need the insight and energy of the young people. And when we can work together, we learn from each other, right? And so we know, I'm glad you're looking at your analytics, because your analytics do tell you that it's this group of people. When we have almost 650,000 followers on Facebook. Some 30% of them are in Africa, right? So you have a lot of people in Nigeria and Ghana who are logging on and wanting our content. Content is king, but we can't make assumptions about what people want and what people like. We have to ask them, and we have to watch the numbers and watch the analytics. On the other hand, we can't just stay in the analytics all of the time. We have to deliver that content. And that's why I'm saying collaboration is king. We got to work with each other and do some things that help to get that content out there.
Okay, now this is a softball question for you, but I'd be remiss if I didn't. You were there at the beginning of the launch of the campaign of the first Black governor. Tell me about that.
Okay, so let me give you the bottom line, and then I'll go back. The Afro was the only media that endorsed Westmore in the primary. So our process, we have a process. People may not believe it, but we have a process. And we send out a questionnaire to the serious candidates, some people that we believe to be the serious candidates for race. And usually it's almost everybody. And they send back into us answers to our questionnaire. And then we actually interview people. And we interview them around issues and questions that we believe are important to the community that we serve. And so regardless of race. And when we interviewed the candidates in the primary for governor, to us, Westmore stood head and shoulders above everybody else. And we didn't know him personally. At least I didn't know him personally at the time. I had met him maybe once or something like that. But so it wasn't just because he was Black, but he had the best answers and he was Black. So we endorsed him. And
does he make you proud?
I am so proud of him. I am proud. I am proud of him. First of all, I'm proud of him because he didn't come the traditional route to the office. He's well qualified. He's not a career politician. Well, let me say it another way. He's not a career elected politician. All of us are political. So he is absolutely, all of us are political. He's absolutely a politician, not a career politician. Secondly, his platform was inclusive. The no one left behind, let's do for all what we do for one. And so that was very appealing. His energy level.
Infectious smile.
Yeah, infectious smile. His energy level was important as well. And I guess I should say this first, his understanding of the issues and his ability to articulate solutions. So he came across as a person, and you can see this now, who was going to be no nonsense, is going to get it done. I'm going to surround himself with talented people to get it done, and is going to include people of all races and backgrounds. And so that was appealing and is appealing to us. Now, he's just been there, what?
5 minutes.
Yeah, a month. Not even a month. His inauguration was January the 18th.
The son was tagging him on date. He hadn't even been sworn in, and they were dinging it.
Yeah, well,
back up.
Well, good. Tell them go ahead and do that if they'd like, but that's not the Afro's position. That's not our position. Now, let me say it this way: any politician, if they, if there's something that they do that's egregious, something that they do that we really don't think is in the best interest of the community, will we call them out? Probably.
You won't have to, because his wife is not a game.
No, she's not. No, don't sleep on Dawn Moore. She's strong. And so he's got a strong family. I think he presents that strong family face as well.
We need that.
And we need that. We need that to counter all the stereotypes about our families. He's approachable. He's accessible. He is well prepared, and he cares. He's a superstar. So we'll have to see how his political career plays out after this first term.
Well, I'm not going to steal from your time, but is there anything that you would like to share or inform or,
Well, there are a couple of things I'd like to share, and people can get this from afro.com. We have some events coming up, so if it's okay to plug a couple of those. One
Sure.
is one is a social event. We have a high tea, which is a lot of fun. Men, you're welcome to come on April the 22nd. But it is the social event of the season, and I like it because there are men and women, mostly women, from all walks of life who come to this tea. So,
Okay, what is a tea? I'm
you
coming
know,
here to sip some Lipton tea that I used to sip with Grandpa.
I don't think it's going to be Lipton tea, you know. But traditionally it was a gathering of women that came together to sip tea. We come and have fun,
And they come with the hats too. Isn't
oh,
the
yeah,
hat a part of the game?
yeah, I wear one hat a year. That's that hat at that tea. I'm not a hat person, but you know, it's a great social event, but also a great event that we can showcase, you know, African American women. So we have that. We also have Black.
Where is it?
It's gonna be at Martin's West on
But
the
y'all have done one. I mean, because
This is the
Prince
fifth
George
one.
is
This is
just
the-
one.
We've done 5. This is the 5th
Five.
one.
Something in Prince George's before though.
We did it in DC last year. We'll do it in DC again this year. I don't have the date. It's usually in June. We also have a Black Business Matters Expo coming up. That's
Really?
free. It's free. This is our 3rd year. The first year, Robert Smith was our keynote speaker and we honored Eddie Brown. So we're going to do virtual and in person this year, and we're going to couple it with a career fair, and that date is Thursday, April 27th. We have a Juneteenth celebration on Monday, June 19th, where we're going to honor some of the fathers and mothers of the faith, 2 or 3 on that day, just to really talk about the role of the church and the press in as we celebrate Juneteenth. So that's happening in June. And then no date for this yet, Donnie, and you let me know if you want to participate in this. You know, we go to fashion shows, and this is another fun event, and it's mostly women. We're going to do a Men on the Runway.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll reach back out to you. It's nice when you have professional models, but it's also really nice when people from the community do it like the women do. So.
Well, we have some dynamic people in this town with fashion. I mean, Kevin Scott comes to mind.
Yep, Kevin. So Kevin, and then we just lifted up another African American male designer in the Afro. So we want to showcase the brothers who are bringing it. That's going to be in the fall, and then the 60th anniversary of Clean Black is coming. So all those things you can find on Afro.com. So I want people to know that. We also are getting ready to launch our own version of Eventbrite. So we're going to have our own Afro. It's AfroTix.live. You can publicize some events free, some you'll have to pay for. We want to have our own go-to, because when people come to our city, I know when I go to another city, I want to know, well, where are the Black restaurants? Where's this? What's that? So we're going to have that, and jobs on our site and all. So we're going to be our own Eventbrite.
Any encouragement to our Black elected officials? And I gotta say this, big sis, we have been a part of putting everybody in office, but we don't put them in office because it's about them. We put them in office because it's supposed to be about us in a 63% Black city, 30% Black state. And how do we better hold Black elected officials, male and female, accountable to our needs? You need land. You need business opportunities. I need business opportunities. We don't need Black elected officials that get in there and next thing we know, they signing $42 million deals only for other communities. What about us?
Well, I think the two things. I think, first of all, we need to be vigilant ourselves and understand the issues and the platforms that we want to hold them accountable to, and be proactive with, and I know it takes some work. So it's one thing to say, I want you to be more accountable to the community, right? It's another thing to say, listen, in your governmental policies that say support minority businesses, you have to make sure those numbers, stop telling us that you can't meet the numbers. State of Maryland, stop granting waivers to majority companies who don't meet the numbers. When it comes to Black media, for example, make sure that the departments that you control government are also placing their ad dollars in Black media. We can say that, communities can say that. And in order for us to be able to say some of those things, we have to, and it's some of those hearings and things are virtual now. We have to make sure that we're informed on those issues. So we're not just talking. So we're not just saying, oh, you need to do more for the Black community. Well, let's talk about what we mean about that. I mean, regardless of our position on cannabis, if we are, saying that this is an economic engine, then we advocate it for those who believe that it is and want to do that. Advocate for the African Americans to get these licenses. Lift up the ones that have those licenses. We can't just say the schools are bad. The schools are not bad like that. Let's make sure the funding's in place. And let's stop kicking Dr. Santalisa's down, because she doesn't have to be with us. She's got all kinds of credentials. There's a lot of education that happens, beyond that. Are we at the school board meetings? Do we know?
Oh, no, because they put you out. Mr. Glove, Charlie Duggar, 30 seconds. Charlie Duggar, 30 seconds.
Right. So anyway, so we have to be informed. And the best way to be informed, I'm going full circle, is through the Black, and there's a difference between the Black press and the Black-owned press. That's another whole show.
Woo!
Everything that's Black is not owned by Black people. Mm.
Thank you very much for your time. Can we get a prayer for our city before you go? I'm not going to let your preacher head off. We need prayer. Can we get a prayer?
We can get a prayer. So, Father, we come to you in the name of Jesus, thanking you for Baltimore. God, change our conversation. Let us see Baltimore as you see Baltimore, as a blessed city with people who love you, who love the city, who want the city to progress. Let us not be part of the conversation that tears Baltimore down, because where there's darkness, anytime there's just a glimmer of light, it dispels darkness. So, Father, rather than us being complainers, help us to be part of the solution and not the problem. I thank you for Donnie Glover and the platform that you've given to him, the platform that you've given to the Afro, to the Baltimore Times and other Black media throughout this region. And I pray for those who are listening, those who read, those who really care about what's happening, God, that you would give us the courage to do that which we need to do for the betterment of our city and the citizens who belong to you. And that's our prayer. And some pray in different names, God, but I pray in the name of Jesus and say amen.
Amen. Thank you for being my big sister all these many, many moons. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being my younger brother, and thank you for the shout out to our parents. And I'm not telling Impeccable might blow us up. No, I'm just kidding. All right. God bless, and God bless everybody who's watching today.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All
Good
right.
morning, world.
Yes.